Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller Pilates, Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates. That means those people that have an agreement with me to use my trademark with theirs or their name or display it as a means of promoting business. But other than that, beyond that, this broadcast is also meant for the Cornu Core, and this is Cornu is my trademark, and which points to the biomechanical interaction in the body I identify as Cornu tension. That's one thing that you get from me is an identification of Cornu tension. Now, you may or may not hold that in any esteem at all, but as my number 3 states coming up, Cornu tension is just the way it is. From this point of view, from the MMP point of view, and maybe more backing up one, from my point of view, because it's my point of view that is saying I identify Cornu tension that this image points to. The reality of the biomechanics of Cornu tension in the body. That may just be fancy in my own head, but it's a sensation that I can connect to and that I use to instruct others and have found good results with. You may have something else entirely different and way better. What I want you to know from this broadcast is exactly what this broadcast is about, and that it looks at biology and it looks at physics. And it tries to explain what Pilates is within the realm of biology and physics. And so we're talking about MMP. The physics that we're talking about includes quantum and all of its ponderance of the nature of observing. Within MMP, spirit is observing, and observing is within the physics of the world that we live in. That nobody really has a hold of definitively on what the nature of that is. So when someone, another Pilates passionate talks about some connection they have with it, for me, from my point of view, I'm looking at the nature of observing and how powerful that is and how fundamental that is to human nature. That in some way, perhaps, maybe not at all, I don't know, see? I think we all come from our own simulation of what it's like out there. And the MMP point of view is a theory that there's an ideal within Joe's original work based on his definition, promise, and sequence. You've heard that before. So, my number 1 is a quote of 2 words. It's a statement, and the quote is, "Gravity sucks." And that comes from Peggy Winston, who holds the record of 665 days in space for an American. I think the Russians have been up there forever. But be that what it may, 665 days. And well documented in the National Geographic, A Strange Rock, pointed out to me by Kipling Sawat, an instructor in Chicago. So great documentation of her returning this last time, Hope being in space for so long. And she said, you really had to just concentrate about your arm, and it was so heavy that it took your concentration, and that it was heavy, right? Gravity sucks. And this is the playground of a Pilates instructor. And awareness that, so number 2 is that Pilates is a reaction to reality. Joseph Pilates choreographed conditioning that in and of itself creates a grammar to extend, which is what really makes Pilates fun, is that when you recognize the grammar within the original work, then as to where you go and what you do next with your student, you at least have a familiarity with the grammar so that your language is somehow resonant to the grammar that's already in Joe's original work. Okay, so my number 2, that Pilates is a reaction to reality, so much of that is, gosh, you could spend forever just talking about the sequence itself and how there's progressive pattern within it, and the pattern mirrors the reality, or is a reaction to the reality that we're in. You know, being able to flex and extend, defining a plane in space, and then being able to move sideways, ideally at right angles, you take up 3-dimensional space, and it's what you seek to express control within. But already there's ideals involved of the plane here, the midline, and the 90-degree plane, and then all the space in between those 2 planes. Usually explored or controlled movement within through rotation. Pilates is about, to me, for me, has been for me, is about coming to appreciate the physics that's involved when the body seeks to get from A to B, and how sophisticated the body is in the way it engages itself to move through space. Which brought me to number 3 that I've already talked about, and that is, to me, from this point of view, right? There's 10,000 points of view from my point of view. Core new tension just is the way it is. It's the way the body actually achieves what it's after, or seeks to, depending upon how tight and stiff and unconnected everything is. When you watch Michael Jackson, he run the 440 for the gold medal, his hips, shoulders, and ears, man, are in a line. And however that's happening, it shows the capacity of the human being to look like this human being racing, moving through space. So, down here or here at the conventional, contemporary, traditional, you know, the core is whatever someone wants to call it. And it's really undefined anywhere, very specifically, that I know of. And because I don't know much, all I do know is that MMP point of view acknowledges the biology's capacity to make a rotational dynamic at the hips. And that rotational dynamic is as a grip that has the capacity to involute in its making. Right? As it makes the grip. You know, what is a grip? It goes from here to here. In MMP, that grip is the core. The powerhouse is that grip. Because until you have a grip here, you can't counterplay against others that exist within the body. Now maybe it can, and surely it does, and many a client I've had that do rolling like a ball, like a brick, because they're so tight and so stiff, or what they, you know, or so incapacitated, or uningratiated with inheritance. Any of the things that take you out of the bell curve of the human being. I think the importance in understanding the physics that the human being is reaching for within the context of Joe's choreography extends across the spectrum because it's ideal in nature. Because but it acknowledges the reality of front and back and sideways and rotation. MMP is an invitation that says, look at what you're doing and find experience in how you're doing it, so that the sensation of what I'm talking about and actually asking you to intellectualize with will make sense. Because the only confidence I have to give you, and it's not much among the 10,000 things and all the different ways that you can claim authority and legitimacy and your confidence and what you're passing on. Right? MMP is this little sliver of an ideal that looks at that considers how the biology accomplishes the physics. And an understanding what the core, within the MMP point of view, what the core really is, and how the core counterbalances other endpoints of tension. And by that, that's my nomenclature. An endpoint is, here's an endpoint, and there's an endpoint, and there's an endpoint. And that's the end of something that you can only see the end of, right? Like there or there, an axis of rotation. What do you have? See, the question rambling around in my head is, what do you have in your understanding of physiology and Pilates and yoga and martial arts and kinesiology and biology, all of that else there is to be known about Stand Up Straight? That should have been the title. I'm going to make that a title for Facebook. Stand Up Straight. How do you do that? How do you do that and accomplish a sensation that gives you the discernment or the feedback that you're lined up? Where else do you get that? So now we're at once evaluate perspectives. So It's an identification. I didn't make it up. My trademark is unique, and it points to the fact that that kind of tension exists in the body. And within the point of view of MMP, that's the fact of the matter. That's the physics that the body so eloquently engages in to stand up straight. Because why? See, because why? And that goes to my number one. Gravity sucks. Why are we trying to stand up straight? Because gravity sucks. And to the extent that we can actually take something and stretch it, if we can grab something that's just a lump of mass and a biological organism, but we can engage it in a way that does this and this and connects all the way down into the metatarsals through the body. I'm grateful that I've gotten to make so many broadcasts, even if they haven't been listened to, but I've got to make so many broadcasts that are available on YouTube to everybody. So that when and if, maybe when, somebody shows up and I'm not here to explain it, maybe they'll get a ride up the gondola, right? You pay for a point of view to go up the mountain and look around. And MMP is a point of view of Pilates, and CT is a point of view of biomechanics, right? So you may want nothing to do with Pilates. Can't understand that, but through some people's exposure to what they think it is, or have felt it to be, I can see why you wouldn't want Pilates anymore in your life. But certainly, don't miss the fact that core new tension is what it is. And that's the way the body is accomplishing the physics that it engages in to move through space. That's my opinion and my point of view, and it's been my best effort to try to represent it to you as a carousel that goes around. And so the frequency of familiarity that you hear me say something builds confidence in what you think is coming next. Gives you, and having affirmation that you know what I'm saying and you've heard it all before. Right? So stand up and explain the three things straight from Joe, and the two things of core new tension and Michael Miller Pilates, and just make that an explanation. You don't have to understand it the way I do. You're just actually saying 5 things, really, being able to say 5 definitions. Well, there's Joe's definition, right? There's his statement that contrology develops the body uniformly. There's his sequence, which is more than a few words, but it starts hundreds, roll up, roll over, and ends with push up, right? And then there's two things from me, Michael Miller, and that is the definition of core new tension, oppositional rotation between axes, and there's the MMP definition of Pilates, which is uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. And all of that comes straight out of the first 3 things from Joe. Okay. It's been fun to make the recordings. And in that attitude of if it's not going to be fun, why show up? I encourage you in making your recordings to be discreet and use discretion. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. And you don't really know you haven't been sometimes until after it's obvious. So learn from your effort to be discreet and use discretion. And it's comforting to know that I lived at a time where technology allowed me to set up a phone and make a recording that was available to the world. Because live can't live forever. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Evaluate points of view. Then add 2 and 2. Direct your thinking. Geist.